Hello and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Today I have 4 Reddit stories for you guys. All credit goes to the original posters, and I will link the stories in my description. My son went missing. What came back wasn't him. My 6-year-old son wandered off into the woods behind our house. I thought he was in his room playing with Legos, but when I checked on him 20 minutes later, he was gone. After tearing apart the house looking for him, I noticed the back door was unlocked. No, he ran out and someone took him. I went catatonic. I called the police, my husband came home, and an all-out search began. When we looked at our security cam footage, it showed little Parker simply walking across the backyard and wandering into the forest. Okay, I breathed, so he's just lost. As long as we find him soon, everything will be okay. And it was the happiest moment of my life when 3 hours later, right after dusk, one of our neighbors in the search party found him. Parker, I sobbed as I held him, so happy that he'd come home safe. But that evening, my happiness started to fade. You see, my son Parker is neurodivergent. He's high functioning, but he still has a lot of quirks that aren't normal for a kid of his age. He's obsessed with birds. He can identify everything from the northern mockingbird to the downy woodpecker, and would rather do that than hang out with other kids any day. Food textures bother him to no end, especially dairy, and when just watching him drink a cup of milk or eat yogurt makes him retch in disgust. He throws a fit if anything gets wet. Even a drop of water on the tablecloth will send him spiraling. So imagine my surprise when I spilled a glass of water at the dinner table and Parker didn't react at all. Normally he'd be grabbing the tablecloth and running over to the dryer, screaming at me to get it dry. But instead he just sat there, oddly still, eating his chicken nugget. I guess he's just too wiped out to care. But I mopped up the water. I couldn't shake that horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. Later that evening, I sat next to Parker's race car bed, pursuing the bookshelf for a book. It was a hard choice, a favorite, like there's a walk-it in your pocket. Or should I make him up one of my silly tales about Iris the Ilbis? I felt like this night wasn't real, like I was dreaming that Parker was here, safely tucked into bed, and that soon I was going to wake up to him being still missing, still gone. I swallowed that thought and focused on my beautiful boy's face, fighting back the tears welling in my eyes. Do you want Dr. Seuss or a story about Iris? I asked him. He tilted his head. Dr. Seuss, he said after a second. I opened the book and began to read. He didn't notice the tears rolling down my cheek. Soon it was over, and I was turning out the lights. But as I turned my heel, he called after me, "Can I have milk?" I stopped in the doorway. Parker hated milk, another one of his quirks. Even watching me drink it made him retch in disgust. Sure, I said, my heart pounding in my ears. Something woke me up in the middle of the night. 3:26 a.m. Read the time on my phone. Still 3 hours before I have to be up. I sighed, pulled the covers around me, and rolled over. I froze. The door was open, and there, peeking around the corner, was Parker. He was just standing there, watching me sleep, watching us sleep. And maybe it was my imagination, but in the darkness, it looked like he was smiling. Parker? He dipped out of view and began to run down the hallway. Parker, wait! I called out, jumping out of bed. Parker! I ran out of the room just in time to see him disappear into his bedroom. But I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, because he'd been running down the hallway on all 4s. I woke up before Parker did, unable to shake the jittery feeling in my stomach. I busied myself by mixing up some from scratch pancake batter and dusting off our waffle maker. Parker safe. This calls for a special breakfast, I told myself. Then why did I feel like something was so horribly wrong? I poured the thick batter into the waffle maker. It sizzled on contact. As I closed the lid, though, my phone began to ring. Franklin Police, read the caller ID. Huh? Hello? Miss Zimmerman, a deep voice asked. Yeah? This is the Franklin Police Department, the voice replied. And I'm thrilled to tell you we found your son. Every muscle in my body froze. What? Someone apparently found him in the development on the other side of the woods, only an hour after he went missing. They've been trying to get in contact with us, but we only just got a hold of them now. He's here at the police station. Would you like to talk to him? I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. The phone was slippery in my sweat-covered hands. I don't understand, I said finally. A neighbor found Parker last night. But you're saying Parker's with you at the station? Before he can reply, I heard a soft footstep behind me. I whipped around to find Parker was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, his ice blue eyes fixed on me. Mommy, he said softly, who's on the phone? The inheritance. The news of her estranged uncle's passing came as a shock to Emily, especially when she learned that he had left her his sprawling, isolated estate in the middle of the woods. Despite her reservations, Emily decided to take quick possession of the property and see what her uncle had left her. As soon as she arrived at the estate, she sensed that something was off. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the trees seemed to loom closer as if watching her every move. But Emily was determined to claim what was hers, and so she began to explore the sprawling estate. It wasn't long before she discovered the hidden basement, filled with strange and stirring objects. As she ventured further into the darkness, she began to feel a growing sense of unease. It was then that she saw the door, the one that was chained shut with a rusted padlock. Ignoring the warnings in her mind, Emily pried open the lock and sprung open the door. The stench of rotten decay overwhelmed her senses, and she could see a pile of bones in the corner. And then she heard it, a low growling noise coming from deep within the darkness. Petrified, Emily tried to run back up the stairs, but something was pulling her back down. It was as if the shadows themselves had come to life and were dragging her down into the abyss. She screamed for help, but there was no one there to hear her. Days later, Emily's friends went to the estate to check on her, but all they found was an empty house and a trail of bloody footprints leading down to the basement. To this day, no one knows what happened to Emily, but some say that her uncle's dark legacy had finally claimed its final victim. A bird granted me a simple wish, for now I've seen wonders and horrors you can only imagine. A few days after my 13th birthday, I saved the life of a blue jay, scaring my cat away at a crucial moment. Grateful, the bird granted me a wish. Unfortunately, the jay was also impatient and only gave me 15 seconds to decide. I've always wanted to be smaller, I said, and it was true. As 6'6" woman, I'm constantly met with gawking stares and reminders that the world isn't built for me. Clothes don't fit, cars are too small, and the only men who want to date me are fetishists. Yep, said the blue jay before flying off to look for worms. The next day I woke up and I was 5'8". Getting in the car was awesome. It felt like I'd boarded a plane and been upgraded to first class. No one on the street even looked at me. I headed to Macy's and bought a whole new wardrobe. Everything fit right off the rack. I swept out the doors, my arms laden with shopping bags, and had to stop myself from bursting into song. The next morning, I was 4'5". None of my new clothes fit. Outside people were staring again. I couldn't reach the pedals of my car. I ran out to my yard and screamed at the blue jay, but it just startled away. Maybe it wasn't even the same bird. I went inside and cried and watched TV. All day, the blanket seemed bigger and bigger, and when I measured myself just before bedtime, I was 3'2". The next morning, I was no more than a foot tall. Getting out of bed was terrifying. I clung to the fitted sheet and rappelled down the side of the mattress and finally landed in a heap on the floor. I stole clothes from an old Barbie my niece had left in my office and headed out the cat door. Outside, I yelled at the birds again, and they looked at me hungrily. "Why would you do this to me?" I shouted. "I saved you." A blue jay fluttered down and examined me. "Are you mouse?" it asked. "You funny." And I realized the bird wasn't malicious. It was an idiot. "Please," I said, "can't you undo the wish?" "Worm," shouted the bird, and it flew off to fight over a piece of rope with another jay. By the end of the day, I was less than an inch tall. For the first time, fear truly set in. I would only keep getting smaller. Perhaps I would eventually disappear. Or perhaps there was no such thing as disappearing. Perhaps you could grow smaller and smaller infinitely. I wasn't sure. But I knew that as far as my old life was concerned, I was basically dead, a tiny ghost walking the world unnoticed. That night, I tried to sleep in the warmth of a paper napkin I dropped a few days earlier, shaking with cold and fear, wondering what the morning would bring. It became difficult to tell how small I'd grown by the next day. I only knew the fibers of the paper towel stretched out like a thick mass of spider web that stretched out in all directions. Around me, I now sensed the movements of terrifying mites that towered over me like great eldritch beasts. They examined me with their greedy eyes and opened their mouths to reveal teeth sharper than fine hair. I could imagine them cutting my body into pieces finer than glass dust. And I ran, covering inches in hours, screaming that I didn't want to die. Soon I was stepping past impossible viruses whose wiggling hair-like tentacles flopped at random, threatening to break my skin with the faintest contact. The universe no longer seemed to be in order, but was breaking down to chaos. Nothing had a mind, but merely moved. I began to sense the wavelengths of light as having true width. Soon they were longer than my body. My mind began to untangle as I realized I had been a knot before. It was as if the intricate folds of my brain were being pulled taut to become an infinite string. I would have shaken with terror, but my body was not, as it had once been. I was something not quite human now. And then the world became empty. The distance between all things seemed to become infinite, though at times the air buzzed with the humming of electrons or perhaps something else unknowable. I grew ready to disappear. I've never believed in anything, but now I'd witnessed a feckless bird with unimaginable power. Perhaps I should have called to it. Instead, oddly, I found myself praying to myself. And then my voice disappeared in the hum of all things. But when I should have blinked away, I instead felt a new heaviness inside. I looked at my fingers and saw myself adorned with infinite rings, and where rubies and sapphires might have set. Instead, I saw red giants of black holes. Whole galaxies were moles and scars along my arms. But I kept shrinking. Soon the largest star adorning me was our own small sun, and then it too was gone, replaced with gas giants, then smaller rocky worlds. On my 6th day shrinking, I was the sky, and then on the 7th I woke in my own bed. As I sat up, my cat pounced up onto my feet, dropping a mangled blue jay onto the counter. "Good girl," I said, giving her a small rub with my large, ugly hand. I was stalked in my student accommodation. I was stalked by a guest in my student accommodation. I'm 19 years old and living far from home in a studio room. I'm often up late, and last week I was just doing some laundry at around 11 p.m.-ish. I saw a man sitting in the lobby. I saw him around a bit at night, but I didn't think much of it. I'm in the laundry room. I just put my clothes in the dryer and I hear the laundry room door beeping. It meant someone was coming in. There was the man, standing there with no clothes to wash, just staring at me. I maneuvered around him and headed to the lifts. He followed me quickly and cornered me and asked for my Snapchat. I was tired and just wanted to go back to my room, so I stupidly gave it to him. I figured he'd message and try to flirt. I'd say, I have a boyfriend. Sorry if you thought this was anything else. And that would be the end of it. Anyways, he started messaging me. It's kind of normal. Then he starts saying weird stuff like, I saw you a month ago and was impressed. I've been visiting a friend and staying here, and I've been watching you. I noticed that you come out mostly at night. He told me that he and only visiting for 5 days. Then it gets worse. He says, I love you, I can't help it. And then I say I have a boyfriend. He says, I only want you, and continues to completely ignore that. He asked to come to my room, and I said no. Then he wanted a hug. He asked me if I lived alone and if I was a virgin. He kept saying he loved me and that I was perfect for him, that I impressed him. At that point, I recorded all the messages on Snapchat, spoke to him a little bit more to gather evidence so that I could take it to reception in the morning. He's been watching me for a month. I got my guy friend who lives on the second floor to walk me down to the laundry room. He sat in the student lounge area, and my friend called me down. I was shaking with adrenaline and fear. We saw him around the laundry room again, looking for me, but luckily I'd already picked it up. I run back to my room, and my friend says that I can stay in his room, but I said it's okay. I'll just lock my door. It's about 1 a.m. and I hear someone outside my room trying to get in. I asked my friend if he's outside my room, and he said no, so I just froze. I didn't want to make a sound. I felt sick to my stomach and helpless. Eventually it stopped, and whoever it was went away. In the morning I reported this to reception and then went to stay a few days with my boyfriend. Then after went to London to visit a friend, and last night was the first time I'd spent a night in my room since this happened. I'm very paranoid now. Sadly, I should probably be used to this. It's not the first time I've been sexually harassed. One guy tried to kiss me in a club by grabbing my head, and a bunch of other things had happened that I won't go into here. But anyway, I'm terrified to go outside my room after dark. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder and feeling paranoid. Thank you for listening. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing and liking my channel, and I will see you on the next one.